Of course.
Hi, and welcome to our sixth get-together for International Sculptors Day. Every year, Monica Maya and Elizabeth Langtree and other sculptors and I have got together to talk about a topic. And this year, I'm delighted that Vicky Atkinson has joined us, and our theme is going to be narrative. So what we're going to do is go around the room, and everybody's going to talk a little bit about their work through the prism of narrative and how they apply it. And I think we're going to start with Isabel Langtree of the Hampstead School of Art.
Hello, nice to see everyone. It's always lovely to talk to fellow sculptors. So my work is predominantly abstract, and I'm grateful to the abstract tradition because Western civilization really developed its art based on the idea of narrative, which illuminated power. Abstraction really liberated sculptors from having to apply narrative, although I'm very conscious of the fact that when I work figuratively, which I do sometimes, and you can see a figurative piece here, the human eye naturally gravitates towards trying to understand relationships. And so in figurative work, in my case, I always notice that people read those relationships. In my abstract work, what I'm really interested in is the internal dialogue, the internal narrative of the person that comes and looks at your work. So what does each person bring to your work, is something highly personal. It's not something that I want to dictate. So I am really happy with that. The public sculptures I have around the world are all about inviting questioning, inviting the internal dialogue. Picasso likened his internal dialogue to the sun with 1,000 rays in my belly. Wow. And Rodin's internal dialogue was all about the internal dynamics of the body. He would actually remove arms and legs from his sculpture and reattach them so that he could emphasize the completeness of the internal structure of the body. Those things are very inspiring to me. And when I play with shapes, I am conscious that abstraction has liberated me, and I am able to read those shapes in a material way. So my job as an abstract sculptor becomes about investigating the materiality and the form, space, and all the things that make sculpture exciting for me, which is actually putting my hands in the material and discovering what it can do. So I invite you to bring your internal dialogue with you when you look at my work, unless it's figurative. Thank you.
Wow, wonderful. And I love how your work is sort of completed by the experience of the viewer. I think that's so valuable that it's their take on it as well that finishes the experience.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So Vicky, do you want to tell us a little bit about your work in this respect?
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I'm thrilled to be here. Like Isabel, my work's also about the narrative, and for me, often my work it's the sort of the stance or the pose that's trying to imply what the work is about. This is my latest piece, which is called The Conspirators, and hopefully it's obvious. So I first came across some secretary birds on a bottle of wine, actually. And so I had to create a secretary bird, and it was obviously called Miss Jones. Miss Jones then went into the ING Discerning Eye and won a Humphrey Prize, which was lovely. So I then had to do Humphrey, who was her boss. And then that kind of came on. Then there was Chick Chat, which was a group of anthropomorphic birds sort of chatting. And this one is very much just, I kind of see lawyers walking along the street, sort of scheming and conniving with each other and plotting in a pleasant way, not a sinister way. But it's just hopefully getting that feeling of the way they are standing indicates who's the dominant one, who's the passive one, who's trying to persuade who. And so a lot of my work tends to be about the pose indicating what you feel about it and what they think and feel. Having said that, just like Isabel, I would be delighted if other people have other ideas, and one of the attractions of abstraction is that People can read it in so many different ways. And yeah, it's lovely having that interaction between the maker and the audience.
That's fantastic. I love the way the leaning in says it all, really, doesn't it? It's definitely, you're definitely talking. And in fact, the raised ear of the other one feels to me like intentional listening.
Well, and also so secretary birds have these fantastic sort of large feathers. They're amazing. And so one of them, the slightly more dominant one, his feathers are kind of out here because he's saying, this is what I want. And the other ones just sort of like, they're slightly down. They're kind of like, yeah, well, maybe. So, yeah, that's what it was. That was what it was about.
How tall are they, Vicky?
So, well, on a kind of like a small base, they're sort of at eye height. So they're about 1.5 meters high.
Okay.
Wow. I don't know why I thought they were small.
Yeah.
Oh, right. No, I often do that size where I don't know whether it's purely a practical point of view, as in it's a size that I can still manage with the molds and sort of lifting things myself. I have done larger, and obviously I do smaller. I do maquettes to sort of get things started. But it's almost like a sort of 3/4 life size size, and I just always kind of like end up working on that size. It's a size I really like. It makes it approachable but not too scary for the viewer and for me.
Sorry, Vicky, something that I really like about Vicky's work is that when you see Vicky working in her studio, the way that Vicky actually manipulates the material is really fantastic. So you can feel that materiality in Vicky's work, and I absolutely love that. So there's something very emotionally raw about your work, which I find very appealing, and that comes through the understanding of the material.
And the narrative.
Thanks. Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, wonderful. And Monica, can we turn to you now and find out a little bit about your relationship with narrative in your work?
Yes, sure. I was thinking a lot about it because there was a long time I thought sculpture does not need a narrative. Because for me, sculpture is always something like an appearance before me I can encounter. And I thought, well, it doesn't need a narrative. But then I realized that maybe it's not necessary to talk about it, but it's like helpful to open doors for a dialogue with other people, and also for a dialogue for myself with my work. So that's quite interesting. And like you said, Isabel, you open up something for the other viewers to so that they can share their thoughts too and their experience and what happens to them. And with my work, that's the same. So the narrative in my work, I think it's about no narrative, starting with no narrative and diving into the work and devote myself to the working process and listen and observing to what is happening. And this is the narrative that is like born with the sculpture. And so I'm searching for wisdom, and I'm searching for answers to my questions, or I'm searching for more questions. And this is what the sculptures are gifting. And I feel that the more I get clear about the possible narratives, the easier it is to communicate about the sculpture with other people. So it can open up a dialogue, and it can, it's just like an introduction into maybe something that is not familiar for people that maybe are not familiar with arts. So, but you know, if my neighbor, she comes, oh, I don't understand anything about art. Yeah. And I tell her, and I say, look at this, and how do you think about that? And then she says, oh wow, yes. And so I think this is what narrative is about. So it can open up something. It should not close, but always open up.
What your work does for me, Monica, is that it seems to me to offer a pure feeling, a pure emotion. So I look at your work, and especially when I look at you carving, that I look at it and I see tenderness.
Yeah.
And another one brings love, and those pure emotions are very, very unique to the way that you work.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah.
I think it's so true that you can't help but put yourself in your work. So it is that thing of, if, love and tenderness, clearly that's in your personality and it just comes through in your work. And I think that's where you're kind of giving yourself, aren't you, into your work?
Yes. And I'm always reminded, I know that writers, which I was, always consider that you're really telling the same story or going over the same story again and again. It's like an itch that you're trying to, perfect. And, I do this series of podcasts called Materially Speaking, where artists and artisans tell their stories largely through the conceit of what material they use. But actually, for the last 5 years, I've been working mainly in Italy with artists working in marble or other stones in Pietrasanta near Carrara. And everybody's stories vary hugely. But I do think that I find, obviously, being a podcast maker before and since a writer, I think that narrative is obviously, by definition, a part of what I'm doing. What I'm looking for when I chat to sculptors is, what is the story underneath? And sometimes it's, in their childhood, that their father always wanted them to do something or died young, or, that they're processing something quite visceral and quite, well, for example, Kevin Francis Gray, we've interviewed, he's Irish artist who lives in Canterbury as well and works in Pietrasanta. And we've interviewed him recently. He'll be coming out in the summer, but he was born in Armagh in Northern Ireland in a very violent background. And so there's a lot of really fascinating stuff about the way he was brought up and how he's had to sort of, with his own boys, sort of look at how masculinity is and was in his childhood versus, the toxic masculinity stuff you can have around, and trying, when he is a good father. So I think that people have that story in themselves, which pops out in bits of the work, and we were able to say, that resonates. But then also, obviously, in a series of work that people are doing, there's often a narrative theme. So if they're preparing over a handful of years for something, they usually tell me what the theme is, but if we don't, we talk about it and I understand the work a little better. And sometimes one individual piece has a story, as Vicky was explaining about hers, a very visceral story. So, being a big reader and writer, I love story, but I also love emotions. And I think that's really interesting, Monica, about the story of emotions. I mean, that is a story. It might be a slightly quieter, more sensual one, if you like, but it's very much a story of ourselves and of the viewer. I love the way that all of you are so interested in how the viewer, the audience, receives your work.
I loved just to see, that what you said now, that the stories of the artists and artisans, that like every one of us has a story with the own narrative. So for you, Isabel, if you say you're just handling with this topic of relationships in your sculptures, so it's so interesting, for every one of us, what are we interested in and dealing with, and what we can find out with throughout sculpture and offer it to other people. I think that's really yeah, I love that. Yeah.
Is there anything anybody else would like to add?
Well, I think that what we're talking about is a kind of a universal involvement. You know, that all our work, you know, and yours, Sarah, you know, whatever language you speak, you know, whatever experience you have had, those human emotions are what draw us together. And whichever human emotions you bring to our work is going to provoke something in you which is delightful or not, but provocative and I hope inspiring.
Wonderful. Well, maybe on that note, we wish everybody a happy International Sculptors Day. And if you'd like to find out more about it, everybody who's been involved in today's chat, please look underneath the video and you'll see contacts to their maybe social media or their website, so that you can take a look and explore their work more thoroughly. Thank you, everybody. It's so nice to see you all again.
Nice to see you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.